Maverick News, the antivirus program for your mind. And now, the Freedom Reporters.
Good evening, friends. It's good to see the whole Maverick family here again tonight. And I'm Rick Walker, and you're watching the Maverick News Channel. We are the Freedom Reporters, and I'm here with my handsome, and I hope feeling better tonight, co-host.
Not feeling better, so there is that, but I am still here, taking one for the team.
So getting over the big COVID infection.
Yes.
Are you going to be okay? That's the question.
I don't know. We need to still keep collecting money for the coffin. So other than,
I forgot to go to the store, to the appliance store, to get that refrigerator box. But that just shows how positive and optimistic I am about your pending recovery.
yeah.
And the fact that you're still breathing and on the air here with us tonight shows how resilient you are. So I'm glad that you're still with us, Brendan.
Well, I was sleeping until 5:15.
Okay. Well, in that case, I better bring you up to date so that you can comment on some of these stories tonight. And I know that you did tee up a couple of things. So you must have had at least a few minutes to clue yourself into what's going on in the world today. But we have a lot of stuff to share with you tonight. A lot on tap. We have special guest, Marie van Speybroeck, who, and I hope I'm pronouncing her last name correctly. She was a school bus driver, and she has an important story to share with us tonight, and I think an important message, and she might need our help at some point. So we'll get into all of that as well. And this all surrounds COVID mandates, masking, and how we treat people on First Nations reserves sometimes differently than we do other people who live in this country. So we'll get into all of that. And new charges laid tonight against Tamara Litch and
Chris Barber,
the people who helped with the fundraiser for the Freedom Convoy. So we'll have a few things to say about that. And Jeremy McKenzie, who was on our program about a week and a half ago, I think, was arrested and is facing charges related to his appearance on public property outside Robert Strang's home. Robert Strang is the Chief Medical Officer of Health for Nova Scotia. So we've received word on that, and we'll talk a little bit about that as well. Jeremy is, I would characterize him as a freedom fighter. Our government and the authorities seem to view him as some sort of a domestic terrorist.
well, the anti-hate network missed that one.
The anti-Canadian hate network?
Yep.
Yeah.
So, something up there. Yeah, I missed that one entirely, right over my head.
Yeah, well, we'll have a little bit to say about that. What else is going on? Justin Trudeau meeting with NATO leaders has announced more Ukraine aid, and he's feeling pressure from NATO to live up to his promise to spend more money on the military.
As he should.
And he says he's always been committed to, there's a strange quote that he had today. I don't think he meant to say it this way, but he said, I said I was committed to increased military spending, and I will continue to do that. And I thought, well, what does that mean? Does that mean that he's going to remain committed? That he's committed to remaining committed to doing it, or is he actually going to do it? It's just a double negative thing, the way he said it. It was sort of like,
It's a word salad.
yeah, it was a word salad. Anyway, there
You
is
know,
that.
like
What
those
else is
are-
going on? And if we have time, I want to get into, if we have time, a little bit about this massive investment that is being made in Windsor, Ontario, Canada, on the Windsor-Detroit border for this automotive car battery facility. It's a $4.9 billion investment by Stellantis and LG. And of course, there is a ton of government money going into that. And the reason I want to talk about that is not just because I'm into cars, but because I just want to talk about how the government uses our tax dollars today to control us, to control companies and so on. And I just want to go down that path a little bit because this is the automotive industry is a case study in corporatocracy and fascistic government, or fascistic governance model. And I don't necessarily mean that in a pejorative way in this case. What I mean is it's a fascistic economic model. And I'll explain that later. And I'm not calling the car companies anything. This is more about the way the government operates today in Canada. And I'll explain that. I don't want it to be taken out of context at all. But it does show how they control people today. So with that being said, and I think we've teed up most of what we're going to talk about tonight. And also CNN invited a Nazi on to talk on one of their programs. So we might have a moment to talk about that too.
Ooh.
So yeah, that was fantastic. CNN. I don't think they understood what they were doing. But shall we bring our guest on, Brendan, or do you have anything else to tee up before we do that?
Only one comment. Brian Stelter probably was offered donuts for the interview, so
Well,
probably what happened there.
It wasn't him. He didn't do the interview as far as I know. So anyway, are we ready for our guest? It's
Let her rip.
10 minutes past. Okay, here we are. And here she is, our guest, special guest for tonight, Marie van Speybroeck.
Hello.
Welcome, Marie. How are you tonight?
I'm doing okay.
That's good. I appreciate you joining us on the program, and you do have a very important story to share with us. You and I spoke. Boy, when was the first time we connected? That must have been
About
a month ago.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, about a month ago. And at that time, you were still driving a school bus. Let's start at the very beginning and kind of go back and tell folks where you were working and what you were doing.
I've been a school bus driver for the last 5 years. Prior to that, I did lots of things, but working for a really good company, Sharp Bus Lines. I'd highly advise anybody who wants to work for a school bus company that's a very comfortable and easy place to work.
Mm-hmm.
So things have been really well through the COVID. There's been shutdowns and everything, but then when the trucker protest went on, I used to be a trucker, and I've done a million over the road safe miles before I retired from that. And so that drew my attention right away, and seeing people on the bridges, and you had to go and do your part to support. Then when the government's final response after a really peaceful and great demonstration, like when it really showed its colors as support, and the way it was a jovial event. This was not the kind of protest you see in Europe where they're burning things. This is a protest where we're all smiling,
Mm-hmm. So you found inspiration in that, as many Canadians did then.
I did. I felt very inspired by the whole thing and encouraged. And I truly wish the Prime Minister, or at least some delegation from the government, would have went out and engaged in conversation, which would have been Canadian by the standards I was born in.
Mhm.
But that all comes down to like what's happening now. I did have a little bit of a breakdown on a company radio one day. The first time we contacted you, I informed the other drivers that they could have their bank accounts seized. That it quite literally is happening and had happened. And
So you went on the radio, like the
it was in the morning, like long
company radio, to two-way radio.
before the students would be on the buses.
Mhm.
And they having a little bit of an emotional issue that day, and I did let everybody know what it was, and I did honk my horn to say, hey, look, stand up for your freedom, stand up for your rights. I actually told some of my fellow employees too that they probably should consider doing what I did and have the company give you checks instead of direct deposits, so you have some control over your money and where it's going to sit.
Mhm.
And access to it. Anyway, that did result in a 3-day suspension without pay. And it, did calm down. And I actually went to talk with got a chance to talk with one of the owners of the company. It's a family-owned company. And things were going very well. And things continue to go very well.
So just let's pause there for a moment. That was the first, I guess, incident that
Yeah,
created a wave, right?
yes, my first wave of
Discipline.
patriotic what the F going on. I can't help. I'm a Canadian. I got to tell it honestly. That it was a patriotic what the F.
Let me ask you a few questions just about that specifically. You're on. You got on the two-way radio, and there's a chatter going on back and forth. I would think every day on those radios about a variety of topics. Most of it strictly business and logistics, right? But
Yep.
from time to time, I would think you would have some casual comments from one bus driver to another. Is that fair to say?
It's fair to say it's frowned upon, but it does happen occasionally.
Yes. And in all, how many years had you been driving bus for them?
5.
5 years. So in 5 years,
I've driven in 5 different divisions, big cities, little towns, all over the place.
so over those 5 years and all the hours that you would have spent on that radio, did you ever hear anyone say anything political at any time? Any other driver? Any conversation like at all?
I don't really recall a political comment there may have been, but there are outbursts or comments that are said, and generally it's not really a big deal. That day I was intense about it because this is Canada. I cringe because I'm listening to our Prime Minister run around Europe and all over the place talking about democracy, as he has obviously completely missed what democracy is or what it's supposed to be.
Mm-hmm. Well, I would agree with that.
Yeah.
I think he has a skewed perspective on democracy. He's turned it right upside down. I don't think we have a proper democracy in the way that he practices it. But again, back to the radio. So does the company have a policy that everyone is made aware of when they're hired, with regard to that kind of chatter on the radio?
And I was in violation of the company policy, and I did accept my 3 days without pay and whatnot. But it did lead to some communication that was really important after COVID, because communication just died during the COVID for everybody. I mean, it got to be online things, and we don't even have our actual training meetings. We just did online.
So was it specifically a problem with you doing it on the radio, or are there other places where it would have been appropriate for you to have those kinds of conversations?
It was more appropriate at the time, but it was just, I violated the rule.
Okay. Yep.
No doubt about it. And I can accept that. So the thing is that, again, I guess at the time it was like the humanity of it.
But let me.
It was real.
Because your message was you advised the other drivers, you suggested that they might want to take their money out of their bank accounts because the government had gone over the top and had the now gave themselves the authority to start seizing people's bank accounts.
Right.
Sounds like pretty sound advice to me, and a lot of other people were concerned about it as well, because some of the banks did have a bit of a run on the banks. So you aren't alone, that's for sure.
Now, I have a question. Now, is this something that one of your fellow drivers pointed out to administration, or was this something administration was monitoring from home office?
We do have dispatch people who are diligently do their work, and actually, I've even at times asked other drivers to keep down the personal chatter so that we can hear what they're saying. So I totally understand their view, and they're coming from what they had. Sure. The point was that day I was having a bit of a meltdown, and agreed. These things do shock, and there comes a point where your trust factor goes out the window, and you have to let it go. And telling your fellows that people you work with is just the way to do it. We don't gather. There's nowhere to gather anymore because the mandates had left us to the point where.
Well, let me ask you another question. Do you have the sense that the people who I assume it must have been a dispatcher or another driver that sort of turned you in, right?
Yeah, like was it a driver or was it a dispatcher?
It was a dispatcher that reported to, but the manager's office is directly there, so they can hear what's going on in the radios.
And that person.
There's no ill will against those people. They were doing their job. So.
Oh no, we're just trying to kind of establish the grounds of everything, right? So,
right.
I also kind of would be interested to know: are you familiar with any employees that have been cited with this rule in the past? As you stated that there's often
I don't know personally of any that have been written up. But I'm not in management at all, so I wouldn't have access to that information.
But to your knowledge, you're not aware
that I was the first, and
they said so. They issued some sort of a letter to you.
Yeah, I actually did get a written reprimand and letter and everything, and the terms of it all. And I'm not one. There's the big propensity in this world that they want you to sign everything. So I refused to sign a letter of reprimand. I know I've been reprimanded. I've been reprimanded. I walk out of there with my honor intact and try to do better next time. And what
was the big issue? Like, what was the violation? Was it that it was personal chatter, or was it because it was political chatter?
I think it was because it was political, because you couldn't get away with it that much personal on occasion. You've even often drivers have said, hey, do you want to go for breakfast after, and casual chat. But I think it was more because it was the emotional intensity and the whatnot, and the political subject.
And do you think it was because that some of the people disagreed with you politically?
I don't know their minds, so I really couldn't judge on that.
So there was nothing in the letter to suggest that it was because they were opposed to you politically?
I don't, because I think those radios can be monitored. I don't know if they can be listened to on scanners or whatnot, but I was expressing personal political views that may or may not be reflected by the company.
Right.
And of course, that's probably not the best thing to do. Like, we all should take ownership for what we do wrong. And yeah, I understood at the time, but at the same time, I also think humanity comes into play, where you understand the conditions,
So
Where-
why did you choose to do it on the radio? It's because you really weren't able to sort of gather with the drivers any other way to have a
yeah,
conversation?
there's no way. We don't have those kind of get-togethers anymore. I remember years ago when we used to have a picnic and they put out tables in the garage, and sometimes we'd have a meal there and a meeting, and we had training sessions together. And with COVID, all that just shut down and ended. Meetings didn't really happen. We had an online company do course updates for us seasonally and every quarter. Basically, COVID shut down Canada's ability to associate with each other.
So 5 years you work there, this happens, no warning, just straight to a 3-day suspension after somebody turns you in for saying something that is deemed to be political on the radio. Okay, so that's where we're at right now with your situation. So you took your suspension. We spoke about that at the time, but of course we didn't do anything because we didn't want to put your job in jeopardy, and you didn't want to do anything else to create any more waves. You wanted to comply and follow the rules and keep your job and do what you love to do. And you do love, and this is going somewhere, folks, because there's more to this story still. But you tell me about your job and why you loved it so much.
Well, I've driven everywhere and all sorts of rural routes and big city routes and everything. And then I found I had an opportunity to go out to Six Nations of the Grand River and try that. And I've been there for 4 of the 5 years I've been with the company. At first, it took a little while to get used to, and pretty soon you start getting a respect for the people and the place, and you'll find those kids play outdoors. They're not so much on the computers like ours are, and you don't see them with their noses in a cell phone at when they're growing to grade 3 and 4, the way you do. So you actually begin to see what they're smiling at you every day when they get on the bus. And they like they used to be in the old days when we were kids, where they actually sing while the bus is going down the road, and they're healthier and they have energy. And I've really grown to have a respect for everybody out there on the Six Nations, but their children are alive. And
to bring people up to speed, Six Nations, the route that you had as a school bus driver was on the Six Nations Reserve. And where is that located in Ontario, Canada?
That would be near Brantford, kind of between Brantford and Hamilton. It's actually 2 reservations, 41 and 41A. One is Ojibwe, the other one are the Six Nations. I don't know if you guys, or how many Canadians know that, but we call them Iroquois, but it's actually Haudenosaunee, and the Constitution, the government of the United States was founded upon their original model of how to govern their Six Nations. These people are highly advanced, very intelligent people, very in touch with their history and their children. They love their children. I've never had bus routes where almost every day a parent or a grandparent meets every child at the curb, and they all communicate with the driver. Like, birthdays. They even know my birthday. I get little gifts and things. Christmas. There's not the parent there. It's a really great experience. I absolutely love my route. A lot of the kids on my bus now, their older brothers and sisters were on the bus last year, a year before, or before that. And there's a thing there that there's a respect I have for them, and they've taught me what a beautiful way that Indigenous people really have. And if you look at people's children, you can tell if they're happy people or not. And in general, I think that's a very happy place in general.
Yeah, strong community. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, it's one of the largest, if not the largest, First Nations reserves in
in Canada. And its geography is really, we're right in the, there's Brantford's right here, Hamilton's right there, and yet most of the people out on Six Nations still have to bring in tanked water so that they hook up to their houses so that they can have fresh, clean drinking water in their homes. And that's right here in southern Ontario. Yeah, so
unbelievable.
Much.
Wow. Okay, well, that's a whole other issue we've just barely touched on in the past. But thank you, Justin Trudeau, for not keeping a promise on that front. So let's fast forward a little bit now, and tell me what happened. Why did you lose your job as a bus driver?
Well, okay, it wasn't. I have to say again, Sharp, great company. They did what they had to do to alleviate the situation with the people who are contracting the bus company. So what they did was they a bureaucrat from the federal school system called up, or the principal who I spoke to called this bureaucrat, and the bureaucrat called the office and basically said, take her off the route, or get rid of that out of there. And
why did this bureaucrat do this?
The company said they'd move me to another route, but then I wouldn't be able to oppose this. So the reason is because the last weeks prior to March break, a lot of the parents had commented to me on how great it was that, like with the protest, I had stopped, enforcing the mask rule. And I had seen that, how many people were all close proximity, hugging, dancing together all the time, and how many of us are sick, and how many of us have got. Most of us get sick, and it's like having the flu, and it kicks your butt for a few days, and you're on your way, and you've got a little bit better immunity. I'm not an anti-vaxxer. I've had my shots. I got my shots because I'd like to visit my mother, who's a senior citizen, and I'd really like to work on the prevention, which you required the shots to work with the kids. So, but I've seen it. Like I said, they're rich, vibrant, beautiful kids, and now they get on the bus and they've got these masks on, and they're glum and they're blue, and they sit there and then I've heard kids talking about how they hate it now, and they don't get to do, and there's sports, and they've just started doing some sports and stuff. So with the news that after March break it was coming open, I announced to the kids, well, that's it now. After March break, we can see smiles again, we can see it back to the normal bus. And of course, that looked like to be the case. And then we got a notice or an email saying that was the case for all the schools, but not the reservations, because they're federally administered. But then on the 21st of March, the day that I spoke to the principal, the reservation itself released its guidelines, and I've sent you those. I sent you those pictures to your computer and email, which are contrary to the guidelines that the schools are using. And I understand the schools are federally administered, but the guidelines that the res are following, if the reservation has different guidelines than the school has, how is that protecting the kids in the first place? Number one. Number two is, I don't believe that they're doing any good. They've got the kids living in fear, and they're not giving the parents a choice to who obviously, some want their kids to wear a mask. If that kid comes in my bus wearing a mask, mom's okay, great, wear your mask. It's free choice. But some parents come and they don't want their kid to wear a mask, and that kid doesn't come to the bus with a mask. Up until now, it's been up to us to give them a mask and tell them you must wear a mask. And I'm not a policeman, and it's not my job to enforce this, especially since I don't believe in it. I've seen, like, COVID did some bad things at the beginning, but I've been really watching, paying attention. And as most people that have sort of lost the trust for what's going on with the situation now. Doing a lot of my own research, and I wish people would. Natural immunity is actually better than the shot. There's so many things going on. It would be good these kids who aren't even prone to getting it. It doesn't go for the little ones. I'm talking about 5, 6, 7, 8, 9-year-old kids.
So you're, for you didn't like the fact that all these other students, all these other kids in Ontario right now don't have to wear a mask anymore because the mask mandate has been lifted. But on for First Nations children, they still have to because the federal government.
They have to. The parents aren't given any say in it at all. It's just this is down from the government. That's it. And really, all it took was I was looking for a dialogue with the principal when I spoke to him. What I got was, okay, if that's what you feel about it. And so it was more like a dismissal. And then I went about my day. And in fact, I went to do some training for wheelchair students that day. And then I got called in the office to talk about it. And they already had the new write-up paper written up with my new 3-day suspension. And then which was all fine. I was like, okay, I guess I screwed up again. Big mouth. I'm trying to do the right thing. I'm always getting in trouble. But then they said, well, you've been removed from the route. And we're going to offer you another route after the 3-day suspension's over. And I asked why. And it was because they were told me because originally they said it came down from the federal minister responsible provincially for the reservation schools or the federal schools. But then I asked for a name, and the only name I got was a local guy here on the Six Nations who used to be a principal a couple of years ago at the school I'm at. So I've tried to contact him. I was told he'd phone back today. He never did. To ask him, how it is that for stepping out of line one time, and asking a question, asking for a dialogue, asking for them to actually have a dialogue with me and the parents on my route and the other routes, because they actually are the ones whose children are in question. There was no dialogue. It was just, okay, make a phone call. You're out of here. I didn't have the opportunity to stay with the company, but I would not be able to bring this to people's attention now. Just if you look at what happened at the original, the residential schools, the parents were cut out of the equation. And yet again, here we are in 2022, and the parents are again largely cut out of the equation. Why are parents in our schools not cut out of the equation?
That seems to be a recurring theme with this Liberal government, where they are taking people's freedom of choice away on just about every front. It's just do as we say, period.
So,
yeah.
I thought if we could tell the story, maybe if there's any civil rights lawyers that are interested in looking at this, not only for me, because I feel that when a bureaucrat phones your employer and says, get rid of that one, then the thought of democracy has just gone through a window.
So let me be clear here, or clarify for me. Were you dismissed or did you quit?
I was removed from my route, and the reason I was there is because I love that route so much. And I quit because I couldn't work that route anymore and still oppose this. Because I could have moved on and did something else, but then I wouldn't be talking to you today about it because that's harming the company, and I don't want to harm that company. It's a good company. And I don't want them to lose their contract with the reservation because I spoke to you, so now I don't work for them now. It's between the res, or not the res, it's between that bureaucrat and his superiors, and I guess me, and hopefully maybe there'll be some legal support here with it. I think there's a human rights issue just on that, but I also think there's a huge human rights issue for the Native people who are really the victims. I mean, most of the parents knew they could come to the door of my bus and talk to me personally about anything, and I'd always be attentive to their kids. Now they've got a brand new driver in there, and I hope the kids are being really good to her. or him, whoever it is.
Well, have any of the parents ever voiced any of these concerns to you?
Well, I've got when I stopped wearing the mask myself, and my monitor did. I had parents saying, "Oh wow, we so respect you for doing that, and being brave." Their kids started coming to the bus without their own masks. Some of them just weren't sitting it. I've had parents say, "My child will not be wearing a mask," and I have to then tell them that the company was making me give them a mask and put it on.
So yeah, so if a parent had a child and brought them to the bus, the parent might say, "I don't want my child to wear a mask," but then you would then be forced to say, "No, sorry, your child can't get on the bus unless they put a mask on."
That was
You
what
have to
that was what the principal of that school indicated to me long before that, when I had said some of the parents just were not wanting to use the mask.
and
And
that's what you had an issue with, and you just weren't prepared to do that.
he said, "Remember, we're here to serve the kids," but I think serving the children is serving their parents' wishes, the desires of their parents. Their parents are responsible for them.
Because some of those parents believe that the masks are doing other types of harm, so they would prefer that their child not wear a mask, and those are their wishes. But you have to override that. You were ordered to override the directive coming from from parents, some parents, right?
The bus drivers there are that I don't see where a school bus driver or a monitor are in any way enforcement, right?
That kind of enforcement, yeah.
Yeah,
I mean, you need to keep things calm on your bus and so on, but
we're not enforcement, and the mandates aren't laws. And I think there are some people who are so frightened or so reliant on the system, or not reliant, but mired in it, that they just don't really think.
Yeah. And the company took these actions because clearly this is a government contract, right?
And they're a privately owned company, of course. If they're gonna, they don't put their contract at risk, and who would ask them to? Like, that's their income.
Yeah.
So I don't hold the company in any disregard at all.
It's
other than the fact that they're pretty quick with the 3-day pay cuts, but
and who enforces the mandates on the First Nations Reserve, the Six Nations Reserve? Is it the band council? Is it does the federal government have who enforces this?
Pretty much most of us Canadians, when these things come out and you give us some reasonable explanations why, people generally follow the mandates, and there's not really much reason to enforce them.
Right.
But there's not really a dialogue being offered to them either. There's no.
Well, I'm just asking about the enforcement mechanism in place on the Six Nations Reserve for these mandates. Who has been because governance on a First Nations Reserve is different than it is, say, in a municipality. So these are federal, and I mean these are really just guidelines that the federal government provides, or provincial guidelines provided to the First Nations Band Council and to the schools. So because it isn't really, these are not really enforced by the Canadian government or the Ontario government on the reserve, right? These would be enforced by.
Enforcement on the reserve is done by the reserve. I've never personally heard of anybody, and I go to the reserve quite a bit. I have friends out there. I love it out there. But I've never heard about somebody being arrested for not wearing a mask on the res or whatnot. During when it did, people were very, very good and compliant and did their thing. But at this point in time, all the data that we've been given by the mainstream or the legacy media is coming up, kind of wrong. There's so many other things people are coming forward and saying the truth of it, and there's even some medical people who are saying the masks are causing more harm than good.
And because we're on YouTube, the censorship channel platform, we have to be careful what we say here. So we need to be clear that these are your opinions, and
Well,
you're not a medical expert,
no, no,
and so you're not really advising anyone to do anything here. These are just your personal opinions, and this is just to lay out what happened to you and what your personal story was. So
I beg everybody to do their own research and look into these things and see for themselves, dig a little deeper as to what they'll just believe, because you know it can tell you that the sky's blue, but it ain't right now, right? So
So you quit your job because you really wanted to be an advocate for the kids. You want to speak up for the kids because of what you believe, because you see another side to this other than just the COVID side, right?
it's damaging, and the parents aren't getting a say again in another thing to do with their children and their schooling. Um, it's looking pretty grim. And the fact is, and the rest of Canada is no longer being really held hostage this way. We're still talking about 5, 6, 7-year-old, 8-year-old kids that are living fearfully, because their school system's telling them they have to,
Mhm.
and parents who are not being given the right to say what their children are going to do. And I realize there may be conflict of interest, but the that some parents will want their kids to wear a mask and some won't. Well, that should be their choice. And if the school really wants to do it, they can accommodate splitting the classrooms or whatever they need to do. But um, I think the rights of the parents and the children should come first.
And this had to be a very difficult thing, a decision for you to make, because you do love being a school bus driver. You love the route. You loved the company that you worked for. Everything was going great for you and with the company and with the kids. And I asked you to show me bring along some of the things that the kids have given you. Were you able to do that?
Yeah.
Let's see this shows the kind of relationship that Marie has had with the kids on her school bus.
Oh, sorry. There we go. You know, little things like that. That's my superpower. Um, and this is a book, and it says I'm a truly amazing bus driver is hard to find and impossible to forget.
Yeah, and you do build uh, a bond with the kids over time, right? You see them
Absolutely.
every day.
Hmm. Yeah. And I'm going to miss them all. I hope they're good for the new bus driver. But um, somebody
These
had
are these
somebody.
mostly elementary school kids, or how old are these kids? Sorry.
They're elementary students. Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So here we are. We're talking about it. We're letting people know what happened, and I guess the point of this for you is just to let the other Canadians know that this is still going on First Nations reserves with kids, while in most provinces, with the exception, I think, of Nova Scotia,
Hmm.
um, kids are now able to go back to school without their masks and breathe freely again that way.
Hmm.
Um, what you feel this is unfair?
I feel that it's unfair to the kids. Number one, the kids that go to the high school from the reserve go to high school in town, and they don't wear masks, but they go home to their brothers and sisters who go to the elementary schools. And some of them were on my bus last year or the year before. There's no sense in what's going on. This is keeping the little kids scared, and not giving the parents the ability to communicate what they want to say, and then having the principals of a school and to say, well, we don't service the parents, we service the students. Well, you're not servicing the students if you're not listening to the parents, especially with our Indigenous people who have had that taken from them in the past to such catastrophic endings. There were over 1,200 children that have bodies that have been found. The last time the government did this sort of thing, and I'm not saying that's sort of the bad thing that's going to happen again, because it won't here now. But the fact that they had the audacity to take that from those parents again, and then the first person who says something about it, well, let's just silence this person. They phone up the company, well, take them off. And I'm sure they don't care whether I was fired or removed from the route. They just wanted me out of there so I couldn't say this. So I'm saying it now. And if there are any Native rights people, human rights lawyers, people like that who want to look into this, and this because.
And when you say that, what do you mean by that? What kind? You want to get a lawyer involved? You're thinking that some sort of legal action needs to be taken, but are you talking about legal action for yourself or legal action for the kids?
For the kids, there has to be somebody that can. What if? Okay, you got two kids on a playground. You got to treat them the same, right? You have kids over at your house when you have a birthday party for your child. They all got to get a popsicle, right? It's just not fair. Also, the fact that their parents are being left out of it, that their parents are saying to me, that they're glad that this is not being enforced, and then, well, it is being enforced. I guess my saying I won't do it is just enough to get me out of there. So.
And why do you think it's? Why is it continuing? Is it because of a decision by the local school board, First Nations band count? Who made this decision?
The federal government has given the order. They're in the control. They're holding the pocketbook. They're the ones doing it. The local man who made the call, like I said, he used to be principal of the school I worked at. Don't really have anything against him, and he's doing what he thinks he needs to do to keep his job, and so are the principals there and everybody there. But there also comes a point when, this not 6 months ago, they were talking that RCMP officer, retired RCMP officer, who said that he regretted ever going to take children and take them to the Catholic schools at the time. And you have to, at some point, say, well, will I regret this later? May I regret this later? Is there, and when the general consensus is, well, the parents don't matter, we serve the children's needs, and now they're also dictating what those children's needs are. Mm-hmm. Shouldn't it be the parents that dictate what the children's needs are?
And that's a big problem with today's society.
Brendan, someone's commenting that your microphone volume is too low. Can you increase your...
Is that better?
A little bit, maybe a little bit more.
Is that better now?
I think so. We'll see how that goes and see if people... we'll let the viewers decide.
That's a big problem right now, is that ultimately the parents are all around being pushed out more and more.
Right. In the States, you're seeing this too, where the school boards are coming down on parent-teacher associations. Here, we don't even have them anymore. I'm not just standing up for the Six Nations kids, because our kids went through it too. And now we're starting to get more and more of these potentially maybe things aren't what we've been told they are things going on. And I think we need to be more aware, and we have to protect our kids, and we have to protect our rights for our kids.
And just out of curiosity, And this really doesn't have a bearing on your case because you've already indicated. I wouldn't have asked because it was your own business, but you did indicate you have been vaccinated. But did the school bus company have a mandatory vaccine policy in place?
They, like I said, the company's really good. I got them early on right away because I was anxious to go back and work with my students, work and be there with the students again. And I have an elderly mother that I like to see too. So, but there are some drivers who didn't. They had to be tested every couple of days. They had to go through stringent things, just like anybody else.
Mhm.
The company has not been bad to us. It's a real, like I said, highly recommend anybody who needs a decent part-time job to go there. Even if you got a baby or something, you're allowed to bring the baby in your car seat on the bus, so you can do your job. It's a great company to work for. They pay for training. But
Yeah.
Did they have this policy in place though?
Which policy?
Vaccines, were they mandatory?
The vaccines were not. I don't believe that the company ever said you have to or you can't work here. There were some that didn't get them and ended up taking tests every so often. It was a larger inconvenience for them to do so. But
Yeah.
like I said, I got my vaccines because I wanted to go back and work and see the kids again.
Yeah, I just for the record, I did call the company. I spoke with Graham Bunn, who's the operations manager there today. Very nice fella on the phone. But of course, he said, it's a personnel matter and he couldn't comment on it. Fair enough. But we did reach out to the company and we gave them the opportunity to comment. It just wasn't something that he felt was an appropriate subject. So we couldn't bring him on to further the conversation that way, which I understand. And I appreciated him taking the phone call from us today. And the company, of course, as I say, it is basically a government contract. So they're bound by whatever those rules are on their end. So your manager, the company, they're caught in the middle of this thing as well, right? So the government applies pressure on them to apply pressure on you. It all runs downhill, right?
And that's why I point no fingers at them. And like I said, they're a great company to work for. Grassroots, mom and pop started long, 60 years ago. This year's their 60th anniversary. I wish I could take more part in it, but I just think that this has to be said. And if I said it while I was still working for them, that it might be a detriment to them. So.
Right. Well, yeah, you can't very well expect to get away with coming on here and talking to us in a public way when you're not even allowed to express your views on the two-way radio on the school bus, right? This is a much broader forum.
Right. Yeah.
So after you get off this podcast with us, what then?
Keep looking for a job. If somebody contacts me and tells me that there's some other way to move forward with making conditions better out there on the res, and not just for this subject, for any, I think that we Canadians really have a moral obligations to make sure that everybody in Canada is treated the same. And our Indigenous people, it's a beautiful culture. You all should get to know it. It's wonderful. They're beautiful people.
Yeah. Miss Jeske says you should be proud of yourself. We have a lot of viewers on here. And I would say that you are a freedom fighter. And it is a difficult thing to do. It takes a lot of courage to stand up to this kind of pressure. And it's obviously a very difficult thing to walk away from a job that you love to stand up for something you believe in.
Yeah.
Do you think it's worth it?
Freedom is always worth fighting for. I mean, and equality, and I'm not person who's even super highly educated, but when dollars become more important than people, then we've failed everything.
And obviously, you think that you are fighting for the kids and that this is in the best interests of the kids
Yeah.
because you see the other effects of the masks, the bacteria collection on them. You see the depression that it causes, the communication issues because they can't see each other's faces and so on, right? Can you again elaborate a little bit on that?
Um, it's really hard to drive a bus and actually um, kind of keep control of a bus. As not the vehicle itself, but what's going on. If you're watching traffic and you're, looking in that the passenger control mirror they have up there, you're glancing, but you can't really ever take your eye off the road. If the student's crossing the road in front of you, you're attentive, you're watching it. The kids are a cargo that are like I've delivered everything when I was a trucker. Kids are a cargo that can't. Any other cargo can be replaced. Anything.
Mm-hmm.
Doesn't matter the value. One kid gets hurt on a bus, that can never be fixed.
Yeah, precious cargo indeed.
And we're legislating fear onto them. And we have been for a couple of years now. And now that we're stopping doing it to our own children, we're continuing to do it to their children.
Right. And that's a pattern that I guess we don't want to see repeated, right?
I wouldn't think that that's a good pattern at all.
Interesting what our liberal government is doing to a certain group of people.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So will you be, you're getting your message out here. Will you be trying to reach out to other media? What's your plan or objective? Are you able to do it? What are you going to do?
I've got a game plan. I'm looking for other work because obviously I need to live and eat like everyone else, and hopefully we'll find another job soon. I don't know about today, but yesterday they Sharp had told me that I was welcome to come back and do another route, but then I felt that I wouldn't be able to do this today here, and so I guess I'll find a job, and I hopefully will find some way to volunteer to help out more out there on the res and do more things. I think it couldn't hurt Canada to have a real history lesson about our Indigenous people so that we know what really happened. I know now. I should know.
Yeah, and I as you say, you wish that there was some sort of legal action that could be taken to force the federal government to take a different stand, right? But that's what the truckers were trying to achieve, right?
Absolutely. It's and in the spirit of that, like I said, silence doesn't ever get anything done. You have to, like, people call it simple disobedience. I call it a duty to stand up for your rights, because if you don't, you'll lose them. And we've witnessed that, not just the last 2 years, the last 20 years.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Nowadays, you can end up getting into a contract that's going to cost you hundreds of dollars by clicking a button on a screen, not never having been anywhere verifying you read anything,
Yeah, that's true. And I guess if you had to, if you were going to point a finger, I would think you'd probably be pointing it way up high, way up at Parliament Hill, straight into the Prime Minister's office. Am I correct?
Oh yeah, and not just the Prime Minister or one party. The system is utterly falling apart.
Mm-hmm.
It needs a total revamp, and if it can be fixed at all. We might want to throw the Model T in the garbage. And I understand there's a lot of new Ford 150s out there that are ready to be bought. Right. Just okay. This is not working. When government can't talk to people when they ask to be talked to, especially when so many people asked, and then a bus driver can't talk to a principal without getting, off the route, when there's no dialogue.
Yep.
What are you? An amoeba?
Peasant.
Yeah.
We're all peasants, and there can be no dissent.
Exactly. They don't like comments like that.
And I don't wish anybody any harm. I don't want to hurt the company. I don't want to hurt the school. I like a lot of the teachers and whatnot. And the new principal is in a rough situation. His first year coming in, and I get it all. But dialogue. If we can't discuss things as Canadians without reprimand, this ain't Canada anymore.
Well, this is political correctness that has been damaging our country for probably over 10 years now.
This goes beyond political correctness, though. This is people losing their jobs because they wouldn't get the thing in the arm. It's government coercing people into doing things, and it's now escalating to a point where we have Bill 67 in Ontario that's about to be passed, where it will make basically thought crimes into hate crimes, and people will lose their jobs over that. We're seeing in British Columbia, I think 2,500 healthcare workers now being dismissed because they wouldn't get the thing in the arm. We got truck drivers being thrown in jail because they're being classified as terrorists and enemies of the state, enemies of Justin Trudeau. So you get thrown in the slammer. Sorry, what's that?
Nazis and misogynists.
Yeah.
Calling the child of a Jewish war survivor a Nazi. I've begun to watch what goes on in Parliament and the MPs. I've never seen anybody answer a question that was posed to them. They never do. They just read from a script of whatever they wrote before, and it's not a dialogue either. It's just two monologues. So how is that going to resolve anything? Everybody knows that has a relationship with anybody in their life, that if you have a monologue, the relationship's over. Well, maybe our relationship with Canada seems to be over, at least the current government.
That was very apparent with the Emergencies Act, because when we had the Emergencies Act, they had all these elegant speeches, and it seems to me like you could have had the best speeches in the whole wide world about why not to have the Emergencies Act, but it wouldn't have mattered. The two parties decided, we're going to vote together to invoke the Emergencies Act, and that'll be that.
As long as corporations have something to do with government, as long as there's financial donations, as long as there's all these things going on, you're not going to get government, because it's human to want to expand your wealth. So if somebody offers you the right thing, you'll probably, it's just a little sin this time, and the next time it's a little bigger sin, and then, next thing you're in trouble. Very few people are willing to take bread off the table to help someone else. And maybe that's why I'm doing this. Maybe I'm not going to end up getting another job as a bus driver, or I don't know what my future holds, but the politicians need to do the same thing. The only difference is I made about $26,000 a year as a part-time bus driver, and they make a few $100,000 a year not doing anything but reading a scripted answer to questions that don't reflect the answer.
You know, you said you weren't very educated, Marie, but it sounds to me like, well, I hear a lot of wisdom in your words and a lot of insight.
I'm old enough that I've been there before. And we are there. Like we're at a point where it's just more power grabs, power grabs, power grabs. Pretty soon, you know, if you have been watching, the credit card companies are going to be levying new fees towards the people who we use our debit cards at, because they're, you know, I'm everything's about the almighty buck and nothing's about, you know, the person who needs something, right? $200 a week on groceries. If you happen to be a vegetarian, you're going to have to spend a lot more, and I'm not. But gas. As a school bus driver, when you drive a little four banger car, and you can, you know, drive out to the reservation to fuel gas because it's a little cheaper out there, and it's still $1.56. The $45 that used to get you back and forth to your bus every day, 4 times a day, because, you know, you drive a lot more when you're split shifting, turns into $75, and that comes off your table.
Yeah.
They don't even seem to realize that they're inflating.
Oh, they realize it, and they don't care. In fact, I'm certain they want it that way.
Well,
They want us to stop driving. But, and they have other motives as well.
People might have to start growing their own gardens and forget about paying income tax, I guess, but that's only my view. Sorry for saying that. But what are we getting for our buck? We don't have the right to speak. We don't have the right to be heard by, even if we assemble peacefully, our politicians. Why? What are we paying them for?
We don't matter anymore. We are viewed as cells in a giant organism because we have a collectivist society now.
I gotta wonder what would happen if we just let them do their thing and pretend they're running things and formed our own systems and support networks and did our own things so that we could worry about the bottom line, which is caring about everybody else, making sure we're all okay, we're all fed, that nobody has, you know, we live a good life in Canada.
In fact, I know there is a parallel society forming. There are pockets of other communities forming support groups because of mask mandates, vaccine passports, all of these things where some people have been pushed outside of society. So groups of people are forming just so that they can find ways to survive.
Right.
Job networks and so on, right?
I may need a job network, guys, so if you can. Mm-hmm. But stand up for your rights, everybody, before we lose them all and before Canada becomes something else. It looks like we're walking down a red road to me.
Yeah. Yes. I'm not even sure it's a red road. I think it's a very dark road. I think people think it's a road to communism, but I would say it's a hybrid system of communism and fascism. That's what I think we're looking at and experiencing.
Right, and I'm certainly not pleased about yesterday that I cried when they showed the missile, and so this is what our dollars are funding instead of maybe putting running water into homes.
There's so much work that needs to be done here. So many people in need here. We have so many problems here. And it's like...
Instead, we're giving other people weapons to kill other innocent people.
Yeah.
Well, we're paying NATO
not even soldiers that are getting blown up. There was a grandma and grandpa in their car the other day.
Yeah. Bus full of people.
Well, Marie, I can tell that everything you're doing comes from the heart. I I know that you loved those kids that you were seeing every day. I can tell that it's breaking your heart to not be able to do your job anymore and see them. And I can tell that you love what was Canada. And I I know that all the people who are here watching and people who are part of this community that has been created online here, I can see from the comments tonight that you have their respect, that you are an inspiration for many of them, and for us and for me. And I appreciate what you've done. I wish that it hadn't come to this for you, and I hope that you get your job back.
Well, I hope so too. But if we can't count on that, at least if you lose doing the right thing, you at least tried.
Yeah. I have to tell you, when I phoned the bus company, they put me through to the operations manager, Mr. Bunn, right? And you know, he did. I didn't speak to him very much, a very brief conversation, but he seemed like a nice fella. And
Like I said, it's a great place to work. They're all good people. I have no reason to make waves there, really. And I certainly don't want them to lose their contract.
you know what? It's so many good people have lost their jobs for various reasons through all of this. I think it's a terrible thing. I blame our governments for doing this because they've divided us and they've created this situation where people have ended up losing their jobs. And it's not right. It's not fair. And I think all these people, everybody that's lost their jobs, they deserve to get them back and they deserve some sort of compensation for what they've been through, as far as I'm concerned. I don't think there was ever any need for any of this to have happened. It's ridiculous. And it's a direct result of divisiveness that's been coming out of the prime minister's mouth, out of the premier's mouth, out of all the premier's mouths, out of all the politicians who have fallen into line. They have not been supportive of people like you. They have not been bringing people together. They have been intentionally dividing people. They've used fear and hate to divide people in order to coerce people into getting a thing in the arm that they wanted you to get. And they were using every psychological tool that they could muster to get people to do it. For whatever reason it might have been, that's what they were doing. And as a result, people like you are suffering. Now those kids are suffering even more because they don't have the great bus driver that they had. People in hospitals are suffering because they don't have adequate numbers of healthcare workers. They don't have access or the care of nurses that were doing great jobs because they've been turfed, and it's not right. It's not fair. People need to stand up against this stuff. And
people are dying, can't see their kids because there wasn't a vaccination and they're in a hospital.
Yep.
There's just too many things that are making this an inhumane thing, and you can tell us it's for our own good. But when you actually see that, the numbers are going down on death and things, and who's to speculate? But it's looking a lot like the thing they're trying to push to be the cure is no cure at all, because you can still get sick if you've been vaccinated. You can still pass it on to other people if you've been vaccinated.
Yep. This is some sort of...
What's it do exactly? And the amount of time that you require a booster after less than a year, and then another booster and another booster, and I see rich people getting rich and governments making deals, and we're guinea pigs.
yeah, and the stories that we were being told in the beginning are not what we're seeing now. Was supposed to be the first shot 95, 97% effective. Then you were supposed to get the second one just to be absolutely sure. And then oh, that really hasn't been working. It's really only maybe 50% effective or whatever number they were making up at the time. And then it's turned into now you have to get a booster thing. And now you're going to have to get another booster after that one. And now I'm not even sure what fully vaccinated is anymore. And they don't even have a definition for it. And that's not me just saying stuff. That's a fact.
Yep.
What
That
is
came-
fully vaccinated now? Who the heck knows? So, yeah. But the worst part of this whole thing is the way they've divided Canadians. The hate, the divisive language that's come out of the prime minister's mouth, out of all these politicians, the way they have demonized unvaccinated people, the way that this has been so politicized, the way they've taken people's freedom of choice away.
And it's the age-old tactic of divide and conquer. And if you can get your own people to argue with each other, you can run roughshod over top of them without them even knowing what you're doing to them. And that's exactly what's happening. And I mean, the European Parliament called our Prime Minister everything but democratic, right? We have, Serbia in support of us poor Canadians now. It wasn't 10 years ago that we were supposed to be leaders in world peace and fairness and all these other good things. And
Yeah.
wow, talk about having your illusions destroyed in short order.
That's what I said. Canada is gone, and you can see it now. We have other leaders from other countries calling out the prime minister for what he is and calling the country what it is. It's no longer a free country. Canada
thank
is
goodness
gone.
for them. And thank goodness for them, because nobody else is. The only thing giving any legitimacy to the complaints of the Canadian people at this time is the European Union Parliament.
Yeah.
What the
Yeah,
hell
that's
kind of situation is that? Like, the European Union is supposed to be like, I never even cared for them before. I thought they were ridiculous, and now they're standing up for us. This is weird.
Because we don't have any opposition party in Canada that's been doing its job at all. The Conservatives have been impotent on everything for the past 2 years. Absolutely impotent.
So
So
say to like any of my kids on the route of their parents who are watching, to the kids anyway, be good to your new bus driver and you break them in slow. It takes time, and the bus driver, you got the best kids anywhere on your bus. And if anybody needs a good driver, I have driven everything from 18, anything with wheels and gears, I can move and do it well. So I'm looking for work. Thanks.
okay. Well, if anybody has a job for Marie, you can email us at. Let me put that up on the screen. I'll screen these for you. Hang on a second here. I think I have. There it is, right there. You can email me or Brendan at maverickmultimedia@mail.com, and we'll get it to Marie. If you have a job for her, maybe somebody out there can help her out with some gainful employment so that she can buy groceries. Because she is a freedom fighter, she stands up for what she believes in, and I see her as a great freedom fighter, and I can see that everything she's doing is coming from a place of love, and that's what we're all about here.
Mhm.
So I appreciate that, Marie, and I'm glad that you were able and willing to come on here and share your story with everyone. And we will check back in with you to get an update on your situation, and maybe through you, something positive will come out of all of this for all of those kids on that route. So,
We can hope so, and if not, at least we tried.
yeah.
Thank you, both you gentlemen. I appreciate your help.
Well, we haven't really done much of anything except get the message out here. You're the one who stood up and took a stand. So I think everyone here can appreciate that and admire it. So with that being said, we'll sign off with you for now, but we will check back in with you, and I'll be in touch to let you know how many job offers come down the pipe tonight.
All right. Stay. Thank you, everybody, and God bless.
Thank you, Marie. You have a great evening, and we'll talk to you again soon.
Thank you. We'll talk to you soon.
And that was Marie, school bus driver who gave up her job, not just because she didn't agree with the mask mandate, but because she felt she had to speak out about it because the kids on the Six Nations Reserve are being treated differently than kids in the rest of the province. Because kids going to school everywhere else in Ontario right now have the freedom of choice as to whether they wear a mask or not, and they work that out with their parents. And that's not the case on First Nations reserves, where the regulations are federal, and so the guidance is coming from the federal government instead of the province. So they're working under a different framework and a different set of rules. And Marie doesn't agree with that. She thinks that's not fair, and she put her job on the line. Well, she lost her job. One of many people in this country that have stories like that to share for various reasons. Some of it's because of the thing in the arm, and other people, it's an unforeseen or an unexpected circumstance of the mandates that have come down the pipe, right? So
yeah,
extremely unfortunate. If you have a job for Marie, you can email us at maverickmultimedia@mail.com. That's not Gmail, just mail.com. And she's up in the Brantford area, and her route was on the Six Nations Reserve there. So if you're from the Brantford area and you can help out Marie, you can contact us and we'll get the message to her. And hopefully something good comes from all of this. And that is why we are here, because we are here to get the word out. It is, and it might sound like a cliche, but this is an information war as much as anything else. And we're on the front lines of the information war here at Maverick News, and you can support what we do by donating to freedomreporters.com, where you can go straight to the donation page. There is a hot link in the show description on the YouTube, Facebook, and Rumble platforms. And there you go.
we do appreciate all of your help and assistance. And if you're unable to help us out financially, you can also give the thumbs up button a hit, and make sure you subscribe to our channel for more, as we roll 7 days a week.
Yeah, and again, really unfortunate what happened to Marie. It's just, the politics is so thick in all of this. It has just damaged and destroyed so many lives, and the politicians just don't care. I was thinking about this earlier today, Brendan. The word that came to mind was tolerance. Mm-hmm. I remember as a kid growing up being taught by my teachers that one of the great things about Canada was that it was a tolerant country, that was sort of one of the hallmarks of being Canadian, that we're tolerant. We're tolerant of other cultures, tolerant of other people, tolerant of other people's views, tolerant, that we have a high level of tolerance, a tolerant country. And it's true. We used to be. That's what being Canadian was largely about. It was about being open to having somebody else say something that maybe you didn't agree with, but that was okay. They could say it. It was about free speech, tolerance, being tolerant of that. We were a tolerant society. We need a lot more tolerance and understanding. And it seems like, well, it doesn't seem like it. All the tolerance has gone right out the window. Our government doesn't tolerate anything. In fact, Justin Trudeau has said so. These are a fringe minority with unacceptable views.
And do we tolerate them?
Exactly. You see, he doesn't get it. He doesn't get it. I was taught as a child that to be Canadian was to be tolerant. Justin Trudeau isn't tolerant at all. That's the word that he's missing. That's the word all these people on that side of the political spectrum are missing. They've forgotten all about tolerance. They're not interested. They want compliance. They want you to do as they say. And if you don't, they will crush you. They will crush you.
And then they'll say something ridiculous like, oh, well, you made your choice and choices have consequences.
Right. Those are the words of a tyrant, of a dictator. And those are the words coming out of people who support a dictatorship. That's not tolerance.
No.
Not at all. Throwing people in jail because they disagree with you politically, that's not tolerance. Pretending that you're doing it in the interests of public safety, pretending that you're doing it because these people represent some sort of existential threat to the sovereignty of Canada, that's not tolerance. That's a bunch of BS. You're making crap up in order to throw political dissidents in jail because you're a tyrant. That's not being Canadian. The country is gone. The country is gone because of who's in power right now. It was taken away from us by our government because they're not pro-Canada. They're not pro-Canadian. They don't even understand what it means to be Canadian anymore. They've turned this country into something completely different. And the transformation, while it has turned Canada into something other than Canadian, it is far from complete. There's much more work that they are going to be doing in order to complete this transformation. Canada's gone, and now they're building back better. And in their view, better means a lot less tolerant. In fact, it means to be not tolerant at all. There will be no dissent. Hence the censorship bill. That's why Marie is not allowed to express her views on anything without being reprimanded. That's why she lost her job. That's why so many other people have been crushed economically, losing their jobs. There's no tolerance. That's why Jeremy Mackenzie was arrested out in Nova Scotia because of protesting outside the home, on the street, on public property, as far as I know, of Robert Strang, the Chief Medical Officer of Health for Nova Scotia, because they are the only province that has not announced an end to the mask mandates. And with that being said, I'm going to replay the clip of Jeremy Mackenzie from the other night when he was outside Dr. Strang's office, or home, rather. We played this for you last night, but in honor of his arrest, I'm going to play it for you again. This is Jeremy Mackenzie.
See, it's real simple. That's Dr. Strang's house back there. Now, Dr. Strang is the top doctor for Nova Scotia. Now, Nova Scotia, as I understand, is now the only province that's refusing to lift mask mandates for kids in schools. See, in Dr. Strang, the doctor who thinks that the flu takes years off, it must go train, it must go lift weights and just work real hard to get stronger and come back even better next season, really wants that title. He thinks that's a thing. He also thinks it's apparently fine to jam thousands of people inside the Metro Center for a Mooseheads game, but kids can't go to school. It's too dangerous, you see. You can go to the Micmac Mall, but kids can't go to school. It's too dangerous, and he refuses to answer the question. Why is that? Why did you lift the mandates for everyone else, for everything else? Why is it that my kids and everyone else's kids who were really looking forward to, going back to school and not having to muzzle their faces and get all kinds of bacterial infections and, suffer from, low oxygen and all of this? Why? He doesn't have an answer. He doesn't have an answer because he's an idiot. He doesn't know what he's doing. He's a rugby team medical doctor that is a political placement. He's here because he's a useful idiot. He's a moron that does what he's told, and he collects his paycheck, and he goes home. So, a few of us are camped outside of his house. He doesn't like it. And what did he do? He called the police. The RCMP. They showed up real fast, too. They showed up real fast. We should have told them we were a 55-year-old denturist on a rampage. Then it would have took them all goddamn night to figure out what to do. Uh-huh. How's that going, by the way, guys? There's no accountability in this country. That's the problem, right? And they're trying to say, "Oh, we're in his house. Is inconvenient? Oh, is it inconveniencing? Are you inconvenienced? I feel pretty goddamn inconvenienced. The tens of thousands of healthcare workers that have been released and let go because of these nonsensical, what are these clowns? On the patrol for fire. He's probably looking for a fire hall to go shoot at. Tens of thousands of healthcare workers that you fire and let go in the middle of a pandemic. Does that sound like it makes sense to you? Of course it doesn't. They don't know what they're doing. They're morons. Here come some more people now. It's not hard, man. Just grow up. Grow up and act like a man. Then come out here and answer a fucking question. It's not that hard. What are you basing this on? Let people put their kids back in schools without any of this nonsense. It's theater. These cops are out here talking to people, and they don't have a mask on. And when somebody points out, they go, "Oh, geez, I better put it on because there's cameras involved." It's. What are you, 12? Just let the kids go back to school, for God's sakes. It's not. It's just basic logic. If it's too dangerous, it's too dangerous. They're vulnerable. They're vulnerable. How many children have died from this virus? Any? So you're just senselessly torturing these kids. One of my own, he hates it. On the verge of having a nervous breakdown. He gets very upset about it. And he was really looking forward to going back to school to see his friends. Now his mom's going to play homeschool teacher again for another indefinite period of time. And they're going to give you a day. When? When is it going to be released? Well, maybe in April sometime. I don't know. No other province is doing this. Florida and Texas combined are almost twice the size of the entire country of Canada. They haven't been doing this I think it's banned in Florida. None of that stuff goes on down there. This is lunacy. It's actual fucking lunacy. That man there is mentally ill. At best, he's out of his mind. At worst, he's a compliant puppet for corporations and pharmaceutical companies making billions of dollars hand over fist, and he's torturing your and mine children to do it. And a few people show up with a couple of signs. He couldn't be bothered to come out here and talk to a couple of small women and answer basic questions about how the hell he's even reasoning any of this stuff. And why'd you call the cops so quick? Why'd you scurry around in your house like some kind of a frightened rodent? Is it because you're guilty? It's because you're guilty of something. You are guilty.
So that's Jeremy McKenzie. And that was outside Robert Strang's house, Chief Medical Officer of Health for Nova Scotia. So Jeremy and Morgan May Guptill, 31 years old, of Cole Harbour, Nova Scotia, have been charged with criminal harassment, mischief, harassing phone calls, and intimidation of a health professional. So they were out there Sunday night. And this was as Nova Scotia was lifting some of its COVID-19 restrictions, but not apparently the mask mandate for kids in schools. So Strang was at home, and then, of course, he did phone police because these protesters did park out in front of his home on the street near his driveway. But as far as I know, they were not on his property. And so the RCMP closed off the street to Strang's home when the protesters were there to prevent other protesters, possibly, who might show up from gathering at the site. The RCMP did confirm that protest went on for a few hours before the protesters just left on their own. So you saw the video that Jeremy McKenzie posted, and you could see that there were just a few people there with some signs made out of Bristol board with magic marker, drawing messages on them. Now, Dr. Strang did apparently appear on a CTV morning show and is quoted as saying, "I'm not quite sure what point they're trying to make at this stage in the pandemic," said Strang. "Very unfortunate, and a very small group that I know the vast majority of Nova Scotians have no kind of tolerance for."
Ugh. There's that language again.
There it is, right there. And Brendan, I had not even thought about that quote when I was saying those things previously. And therein lies the real problem.
Mm-hmm.
That doesn't sound like a very Canadian thing. And let us not forget that Dr. Strang works for the people and is on the public payroll. We pay him to do what is in our best interests. And he owes it to the public to answer questions. I don't think it's inappropriate for people to ask questions. I don't think it's inappropriate for people to protest. Didn't seem to me like they were being violent. Let's call it what it is. It's political targeting. That's what the cops are doing. That's what the politicians are doing. They're doing this in coordination, hand in hand with each other. If they don't like you, and they don't like your politics, they will crush you. They're coming for you. They're coming for us all. There can be no dissent. They will not tolerate it. If you don't do what they say, there will be consequences. They've replaced the word tolerance with consequences. They don't tolerate any dissent. They don't tolerate anyone anymore. There's no room for other views. No room for other political views. Justin Trudeau standing there yesterday saying that the NDP and the Liberals have two different parties and they don't agree on things sometimes.
Yeah, right.
They're on the same page. They're working toward exactly the same thing. They both have the same agenda. It doesn't even matter if they've got a coalition. They're working together. They know that they view things in the same way.
They love each other. They always have.
It's disgusting. There is no political opposition in this country of anything, no meaningful political opposition. Where the hell are the Conservatives?
They're sitting ducks. And we're not even going to see an election around these parts until 2025 anyway.
Two sets of rules, double standards, hypocrisy. The law is not being applied evenly anymore. If you are not in line, in sync, in step, marching to the same beat on the same song page, they're coming for you, one way or another. And if you think that you can just sit at home and fly under the radar and it won't affect you because you're just gonna hide, you're just gonna stay home, or you're just gonna go about your daily business, not ruffle any feathers, not take a stand on anything, not speak out, keep your mouth shut, right? How many people do we know like that? It's coming for them too. It's coming for us all in one way or another. It came for Marie. She got the thing in the arm. She was trying to do the right thing. But at a certain point, it just got to be too much.
And now Jeremy is going to be rotting in jail until Friday, so he's not even getting a bail hearing until Friday. That's quite a ways off.
For what? And for what? Because he was protesting outside a public official's home who otherwise could not be found because they're not really working regularly from an office. His home has become the guy's office. He's working from home. That's his office. Where else are you supposed to find him? So now, they just make up these rules now. Now you can't protest. And that's what's going on in Calgary, where they have injunctions in place to limit what the protesters can do. No amplification systems allowed. Not allowed to be on the street. Not allowed to be on the sidewalks. Not allowed to block anything. They moved them from the park to City Hall. Well, next week they'll probably have an injunction so they can't protest there. They beat the crap out of the protesters in Ottawa. And they're telling Canadians that was the right thing to do. And a lot of Canadians believe it. But there are a lot of people on the world stage who see what's really going on, and they know that it isn't. And our cops need to wake up. Our police chiefs need to wake up. Our senior officers and all of our police services need to wake the hell up, because they're using you. And you don't have the trust of the public anymore. Nor should you. Your actions have been despicable. Very un-Canadian and not very tolerant. Which has also been a hallmark of Canadian policing, by the way, where officers have always had some ability to exercise discretion, assess things, decide whether charges should or shouldn't be laid, if they're going to hand out a ticket to someone, based on a little common sense and a lot of tolerance. Canada needs a lot more tolerance and understanding. Pray for Jeremy Mackenzie tonight, folks. Pray for him. Pray for Marie. We wish them all the best. They're paying a heavy price, and they're doing it for all of us. They're doing it for all of us. I've only just met Jeremy recently, and he's clearly being targeted, and the media is smearing him, and there is a coordinated campaign. It's quite obvious, a coordinated campaign being choreographed and executed to get him. And anyone associated with him, honestly. This has gone to a very dark place. We're in a lot of danger, and most Canadians don't realize how far along this dark path we've gone. And we're running out of time. When this censorship bill passes, and it will, guaranteed now.
Yeah.
It's coming for you online. And I don't even hear anybody really even talking about it. The mainstream media doesn't even talk about this day to day. It's probably the most important issue facing the country right now. That and Bill 67 in Ontario, which deals with, it's an anti-racism bill, but it's really a thought crimes bill, the way it's written. Folks, we're running out of time. We need to get the word out. We need to spread the word. And I need everybody to share this video out, because we have to get the word out there. We need more subscribers. And you can help us by going to freedomreporters.com and donating. And I would imagine in the not too distant future, they will be coming to take this channel down. And that's why we need everybody to get over to Rumble as well. because we need to get on these other free speech platforms. We are on Rumble again tonight. We've got the technical problems sorted out there, so we're live streaming there every single night now, and we can speak more freely over there, and it will ensure that we have some longevity and stability to the program, and it will ensure that we continue to get our voice out. We're going to stay on YouTube and Facebook as long as we can. But it's not just YouTube and Facebook that will be coming for us. It will be the federal government, I'm sure, through their legislation, and not just for us, but for anyone that says anything that doesn't mesh with their program. So again, please support us in our work, because we are on the front lines fighting for freedom, and especially freedom of speech, freedom of media. That's what we're doing. And we're trying to bring you stories like Marie's, because you don't need to be a big-time politician to be on this program. We're also bringing you the stories of regular, everyday Canadians and Americans who are being affected by this radical politics that has infected our countries like a cancer and is rotting it to the core. Pray for Jeremy McKenzie.
Well, he's definitely a fighter, so he'll be all right.
I don't know. I don't know if the country will ever come back, but we're going to fight. We're going to fight by practicing this new form of journalism right here. Not the old stuff that I used to do, this stuff right here. To get the word out and get people closer to the truth. So what else happened today, Brennan? We had the Prime Minister speaking to the folks in to the NATO folks, right? So I have a clip lined up from his speech today where he offered comments following his meeting with NATO leaders, where he said he was going to be providing more Ukraine aid. Shall we run a clip of him?
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay, let's get him queued up then, and then we can comment on what JT had to say today. And here he is, Mr. Socks.
Dirigeants à travers le monde et l'OTAN. We came here to continue to do our part to ensure that all leaders stand strong and united, support Ukraine against Russia, and that our resolve continues to stay strong for as long as it takes. Putin needs to know that there will be no erosion of our determination. The catastrophic costs of our sanctions will only grow over time as they punish him and his friends. Yesterday, I sat down with President von der Leyen of the European Commission and President Metsola of the European Parliament, as well as Prime Minister Sanna Marin of Finland. Today, I sit down with fellow NATO leaders, fellow G7 leaders, had direct conversations with President Michel of the European Council, a direct conversation with Prime Minister of Japan, Fumio Kishida, and we got to hear twice from President Zelensky as he continues to demonstrate extraordinary leadership in the face of incredibly difficult situations. L'invasion illégale de Vladimir Poutine en Ukraine menace la sécurité de l'Europe et du monde, ainsi que celle des démocraties. Les alliés de l'OTAN continuent d'être unis dans leur réponse
Some more aid going to
dans notre soutien à l'Ukraine et
Ukraine.
son peuple. Today, we reaffirmed Canada's steadfast commitment to NATO. Canada leads the NATO Enhanced Forward Presence Battle Group in Latvia, which includes 10 NATO countries. And we've pledged up to 3,400 troops to NATO's response force, including air, land, and maritime capabilities. Earlier this month, we renewed our commitment to Operation Reassurance, the Canadian Armed Forces support to NATO's assurance and deterrence measures in Central and Eastern Europe. In addition, since 2015, Canadian Armed Forces mission Operation Unifier has trained over 30,000 of Ukrainian security forces, which means that as we see the Ukrainian military standing strong against the Russian invasion, the brave women and men of the Canadian Armed Forces can take pride in knowing they contributed directly to that. European security is important to Canadian security, and so we are always grateful to the brave women and men of CAF who've deployed thousands of kilometers from home to help protect Euro-Atlantic security and stand up strongly for the values we cherish at home and around the world. The world has come together to impose unprecedented and punishing sanctions on Putin and his enablers. Today, Canada will be increasing pressure by sanctioning 160 members of the Russian Federation Council who've facilitated and enabled this unjustified invasion, which brings the total of individuals connected to Putin who've been sanctioned by Canada to 964. On imposera aussi de nouvelles mesures d'interdiction des exportations qui visent à affaiblir les capacités
Some more
militaires
sanctions.
dans les domaines
The,
comme l'électronique,
are the
l'informatique,
Original
les
sanctions having any
télécommunications,
impact
les capteurs,
on
les lasers,
Russia? Really,
la
I don't know.
navigation et l'avionique,
They seem to be
la
having
marine,
some impact at home.
l'aérospatiale et
Here.
le transport. Putin has and is continuing to commit war crimes and create a devastating humanitarian crisis. We'll be announcing the allocation of $50 million from our humanitarian aid contribution to the World Food Program, the World Health Organization, the UN Refugee Agency, the organization People in Need, and the Canadian Red Cross. Les bombardements et les attaques menacent les lieux culturels et patrimoniaux.
Some more talk about war crimes
Donc, on va verser 4,8 millions de dollars
and more money
aux
for
entités
these
comme l'UNESCO.
organizations. A lot of money going out.
Poutine a fait des graves erreurs. Une, ça a été de sous-estimer la fortitude et le courage du peuple ukrainien.
And already a lot of money going out for lethal aid to Ukraine.
Protéger leur patrimoine. Mais il a aussi fait l'erreur de penser que nous étions divisés. Ce qu'on a vu et ce qu'on continue de voir dans des journées comme aujourd'hui, où on a des rencontres exceptionnelles, c'est que l'OTAN demeure unie et il a fait un mauvais calcul. On est fort et unis et on va le rester. Canada and its partners and allies will continue to work in lockstep to hold Putin and Russian leadership accountable and always be there to support Ukraine and its people. Merci beaucoup.
Thank you, Prime Minister. Merci, Monsieur le Premier ministre. On va maintenant passer aux questions dans la salle. We'll now take questions in the room.
Talk about the Nazis.
There was a call today to increase spending among NATO members to help support particularly long-term stuff that NATO is doing. What is Canada doing on those fronts? If we spending more money, what's happening?
Over the past number of years, we've put forward ambitious increases in spending for NATO as part of our strong, secure, engaged commitment of a few years ago. We continue to step up in our capabilities and our commitment to NATO in Central and Eastern Europe and elsewhere around the world. And we will continue to be increasing our defense spending.
Following up.
Yeah, can you give us any actual dollars there or specifics in any way, shape or form?
No.
We continue to have those discussions at home. We have a budgetary process underway right now. We have a NATO meeting, a further NATO meeting in Spain in the coming months. Those are all things that are ongoing.
Next question.
That would be a no.
Bonjour, M. Trudeau, Louis Blouin, Radio-Canada. Je veux poursuivre sur l'élan de ma collègue. Dans le budget qui s'en vient, j'aimerais que vous soyez clair. Est-ce qu'on va voir une augmentation des dépenses militaires et ça va nous placer où par rapport à cette cible de 2 %?
Évidemment, les investissements qui seront dans le budget seront annoncés.
So it's interesting how he kind of dances around the numbers.
Assurer les Canadiens que nous allons continuer de rester
You know,
engagés
what we're talking about here really is funding NATO funding and funding for the Canadian military directly, but he was quick to cough up about $500 million plus all the equipment for the Ukrainian forces. And we saw some of the consequences of that last night in the video that we ran for you, because that enables any variety of military scenarios.
On apprend que le Canada va augmenter ses exportations de pétrole.
What are your thoughts, Brendan, so far with regard to all of this?
I'm pretty concerned that they still haven't made any discussion or conversation around depleted military stocks for Canada, so we have left our stocks entirely bare, and they're not talking about it, and especially Justin Trudeau won't talk about it. His Minister for Defense did talk about it a little bit, but it was the same kind of dancing around. These sanctions are garbage. They don't do anything. If that were the case, I mean, look at North Korea.
And, you know, he doesn't talk about the Nazis in Ukraine. You're not allowed to talk about that now. A few years ago, yeah, you could talk about it. The media did. We've shown you many, many stories that were done on all these Nazi battalions, the Azov battalion, right sector. We showed you the kids' Nazi camps, summer camps for kids run by the Azov battalion. But, you know, it's because the United States, NATO, Canada, there's no moral compass anymore. They don't really care. It doesn't seem to make sense, right? Why would they support Nazis? And
especially because they've shown us how much they hate Nazis, right?
Right. They say they hate Nazis, but in Ukraine they're supporting and arming Nazis, and they've trained these Nazi battalions. But you know what it is, Brendan? They don't really they don't care, really. They simply care about money, and power, and they will align themselves with any group, including Al-Qaeda, which they really just ended up renaming in Syria. We've seen it time and again, where NATO, the United States, Canada, as part of that, they align themselves with terrorist groups. They've aligned themselves with Al-Qaeda. They'll just rename it, and then they've armed these groups. The United States has done it over and over again.
When I was here, the contrast between the need to ensure that Europe's dependence on Russian oil and gas ceases, that Russia is punished with crippling sanctions, where at the same time we're able to pivot more quickly towards renewables. And in the medium term and in the long term, that is something Canada continues to be committed to, but we recognize that replacing Russian oil and gas in the short term is going to be important. Canada can play perhaps a modest role in that, but our commitment to reaching net neutrality by 2050, to hitting our climate commitments by 2030, remains as firm as ever. And indeed, the partnerships we're looking at building with the European Union on issues of hydrogen, on issues touching renewables, are very promising in terms of getting the world not just off Russian oil and gas, but decarbonizing our energy economy entirely.
Prochaine question.
Policies that weakened
Prime Minister,
our
Murray Brewster
position
with
going
CCC.
into all of this.
Wanted to seek a little more clarity on defense spending. Your government set out its spending plans, and there is increases. The Secretary General today said that all allied nations are going to be submitting revised military spending plans by the summit. Is Canada going to revise over and above what it already planned to spend on defense?
Murray, I think you've seen, as we all have, that the world has changed over the past 4 weeks. Seeing Vladimir Putin choose to not just invade a peaceful democratic nation, but to actually challenge the peace and stability that has led to unprecedented prosperity for Europe, for the Americas, for the world over the past 70 years, means that we will need to continue to step up. The good thing is, over the past number of years, As a government, we have continued to step up. We've increased our investments in defense. We've increased our contributions to NATO. And we are right now, in the context of the budget and in the context of the upcoming NATO meeting, as we signed on to the NATO declaration today, we'll continue to look at how we will continue to step up.
Following up.
And just to follow up, President Zelensky, in his address to NATO leaders, had a very specific list of military equipment that his government would like to see from allies. Tanks, anti-ship missile systems, and aircraft. Do you support his call for allies to hand over that kind of equipment to Ukraine?
Every time I've spoken with President Zelensky, every time he has spoken either directly to leaders or in places like the Canadian Parliament just last week, he has made very strong pleas for more support. And as an alliance and as individual countries, we need to continue to do everything we can to get them that support. There is a sense right now that the Russian invasion is at a difficult spot, and that the Ukrainians are making a real difference, and we need to make sure that they have the tools to be able to continue to stand strong against Russian invaders. And that's why, as a world, or as an alliance, as individuals, individual countries, we've been sending both lethal and non-lethal aid. We've been sending financial supports to make sure that the Ukrainian government continues to function. It's continuing to be able to pay its citizens and its workers. That we've been there with support for neighboring countries who are welcoming refugees, support from humanitarian issues. We talked a lot today about the impending food crisis, not just in Ukraine, but around the world, because Ukraine is such a significant contributor to food around the world. Every step of the way, Canada is going to be part of doing what we can to help out in the best way possible. And what Vladimir Putin will see at the end of this day of exceptional, unscheduled meetings of the leading organizations in the world, from NATO to the G7 to the European Council, is a level of determination and resolve to continue to stand strong in support of Ukraine and against Russia's illegal invasion for as long as it takes.
Next question.
Hi, Prime Minister. It's Annie Bergeron-Oliver with CTV National News. I'm just going to follow up a bit on the question that Murray Brewster asked. Zelensky in his address was asking for more heavy equipment and more weapons. The defense minister, though, has said that Canada doesn't have any more lethal aid in its stockpiles to give to Ukraine. Why doesn't Canada have a larger stockpile? And are you actively procuring more for Ukraine?
We will be sending more lethal equipment to Ukraine in the coming days and weeks, as we've committed to do. We're going to continue to try and help out in the best possible way we can. And as President Zelensky's been asking for various new pieces of equipment, we're looking to see what we can send. At the same time, we're also committing to looking at procuring that equipment directly for the Ukrainians in other ways, by working with allies and making investments necessary. So we will continue to do everything we can to make sure the Ukrainians have the tools necessary to continue their heroic defense, not just of their own homeland, but of the pillars of democracy for all of us. Nous allons continuer de chercher des moyens d'aider les Ukrainiens.
It's just cliches and repeating talking points and using phrases like pillars of democracy, saying they're going to send more aid, but lethal aid, but they don't. When asked how they can do that when they don't have it, he just says they're just going to. How can you send what you don't have?
He will procure it from out of his beehole.
You'll have to buy some and gift it, I guess. And you know, it ain't coming back.
No. And the word out on the street is a lot of it's getting lost already.
Right.
Being destroyed once it enters the border.
Have you noticed that the language is very similar to the language that he used with the truckers? But the way that he keeps using it's an illegal invasion. It's an illegal protest, or what did he call it? An illegal occupation. Sorry.
Yeah.
And siege. They use that word siege in Ottawa. They use it here too.
100,000 refugees, many of whom will.
Oh, it's exactly the same thing, right?
Is Canada willing to commit to that same number or exceed it?
We have said from the very beginning that we are working as hard as we can to welcome as many people as we can, as fast as we can. We've brought in new measures. And when I was in Poland just a couple of weeks ago, I saw the extent to which people are both fleeing to safety, but also torn about not going too far from their loved ones who remain in Ukraine, their husbands, their fathers, their sons. But Canada has an extraordinarily generous number of Canadians from coast to coast to coast who want to do more to welcome Ukrainians into their homes, into their families. Many Ukrainians will choose to connect with family they have in Canada, seek permanent residency. Others will simply come for the time it needs to settle things at home and then return. But no matter what, particularly when we think about the young people that I met in Warsaw, who are so uncertain about their future, that is the generation that will be returning to rebuild Ukraine after this war is done. We need to make sure that they are given all the support they can during these extremely difficult times. And that means welcoming them to Canada. That means ensuring we're supporting the schools and the programs here in Europe that they need. The leaders in our meetings today were absolutely committed to do everything we can to support the refugee crisis, the humanitarian crisis, and the military crisis that is all because of Vladimir Putin.
Prochaine question.
Thank you very much. David Aiken, Global News. Good afternoon, Prime Minister. Just want to talk about something Mr. Stoltenberg talked a lot about today, which is the reset of the defense of Europe. That sounds like a big strategic shift. And I wondered if you could talk how that strategic shift of one of our major allies, European allies, how that might look to Canada and how Canada might play a role in this reset of the defense of Europe.
Well, the conversations around where NATO is going strategically was always going to be on the agenda for our upcoming NATO Leaders Summit in Spain at the end of June. So over the past number of years, we've been building towards a reflection on what NATO needs to do, what we need to reflect on going forward. Obviously, even though for years, certainly since the illegal invasion and annexation of Crimea, Russia's aggressive posturing has been top of mind for NATO. The recent horrific invasion of a sovereign neighbor by Russia brings a new level of urgency and reflection to how we ensure we're standing up not just for our NATO allies in Europe,
what, man? I think,
but for democracies and the rule of law,
I've had
and the
enough.
values that underpin them.
How about you, Brendan?
No, I want to watch all of it. Makes my COVID-19 feel so much better.
I can't torture you anymore. Enough.
That was curing my COVID.
Oh.
So, we're going to reset the defense of Europe. Why do all these bozos want to reset everything? It's like, we need to reset. It's like, look, people, we're not a clock. You don't reset us. Like,
they're already doing it, man. They're already doing it. Whether we like it or not. And that's what it's all about for them. It has been from the beginning. They were tearing it all down, and they're still tearing some of it down so that they can turn around and build back better. And it is a global plan, and you're seeing it roll out across, all the nations. They're all using the same slogans. They're all singing from the same hymn book, right? It's their religion. And They're all playing the same game, and we're all paying the price.
Well,
They're transforming Canada. They're trying to transform the world. That's what they're doing. They're resetting the military. They're resetting the geopolitical structure. The landscape's all, the political landscape is being reset. Our economies are being reset. They're pushing ahead with this. I mean, listen to what he's saying about energy. Do you really think that they give a crap that gasoline is like $1.80 a liter in Canada and higher in many places? $7 a gallon. Do you think they care? No, they want it that way because they're pushing ahead with their agenda to electrify things. Electric cars, you're getting them whether you like them or not. All this electric car stuff, it's being driven by government. That's it. They've created the conditions that force it. Everything about them is about forcing things, forcing it. This is not capitalism. This is not market forces doing any of this. They're intentionally jacking up the gasoline prices. They're making it more and more difficult to keep your gasoline-powered car on the road or your truck. They're making it unaffordable so that you don't have a choice. You're going to be forced into an electric vehicle if you can afford one of those. Everything is changing, and they're making sure of it. It may not be for the better, but they'll tell you it is. It's going to be better for them. I'm not sure that it's going to be better for everyone. I'm quite certain it isn't. And just on this question of cars alone, I could do a deep dive on that, man. And there's a war on cars right now. There's especially a war on the internal combustion engine.
Mm-hmm.
And it isn't just about the environment. It's about money. And it's even about power.
Yeah, either way, there's an energy trade-off. Doesn't matter what you're using, whether it's gasoline or electricity. You're still using energy.
But it's affecting us in ways that people don't really understand or realize. It's about power because the government is using these programs and initiatives to control us all. They've taken control of all of these big companies through grants, subsidies, tax incentives, and regulations, and even licensing. And that's why all of these companies have we're so eager to fall into line with masking restrictions, enforcement of masking. Even look at Marie's situation with that school bus company. Government contract, government-run schools, government-funded schools, government-funded bus routes. What do you get? You get a company that's completely compliant. Whatever the government wants, the government gets. If the bus company doesn't comply, they lose the contract.
Of course.
What about these car companies? They're told that they're going to produce electric cars. So they're incentivized to do it with grants. That's the carrot. But there's also the stick. If they don't do it, they don't get any grants, and they're punished through regulatory restrictions. And they're taxed. So they beat them with a stick. This is the formula. Do as we say, you get a carrot. Don't do as we say, we beat the crap out of you. So not only do you then get a company that ends up producing electric cars and all the parts for electric cars, you get companies that will do whatever the government tells them to do. If the government tells XYZ company, let's just say that they're going to make widgets, but these are electric widgets. And the government says, you're going to produce these and we're going to give you $150 million in a grant, but you have to make sure all of your employees get quadruple vaxxed and wear a mask when they're on the assembly line. What are you going to say? You're going to say, okay. That is a fascistic corporatocracy. That is really what Hitler did to resurrect his economy, and it can work for a while. But the problem with that system is that you end up giving away all of your freedom because the government insists on compliance and nobody is allowed to question it. And if you do, you are punished and you don't get the carrot. So everyone just agrees with the government all the time. So if you're told it's time to build a new road and you're the company that gets to build the new road, and if the government makes a bad decision and the government says that road has to drive right into the Pacific Ocean, and here's $10 billion for you to do this, and then somebody says, well, wait a minute, if you drive into the ocean, it won't work and people will drown. But then the company says, oh, no, that's perfectly fine. That's the way it works. And they say it because they're going to get $10 billion.
Well, all of these guys want to sell us short, and I know this isn't really in the cards for today, but I came across this afternoon, and this is definitely what I would call intentional negligence. So it is less than a minute long, so I think it is worth playing. So.
And no, Ray, Alex, you
sure
shouldn't
like
feel
me,
guilty. Sorry, go ahead, Brendan.
You notice the cost of everything is going up. In my riding, the cost of gas hit $2.14. We know that when the cost of living goes up, there are those that benefit from it and those that are hurt by it. We know that large corporations make record profits when the cost of living goes up. We also know that workers end up paying their price and it's harder to make ends meet. We know that this is a system that's been rigged by liberals and conservatives to protect those at the very top and hurt everyone else. What if instead of the price of gas going up, oil companies simply made less money? What if we had a government with the courage to tax excess profits and redistribute that wealth to Canadians who need it most? I believe government should be there to protect people, not the profits of billionaires.
So, Justin Trudeau and this guy break everything, and then they go, the gas companies are making too much money. We need to take their money and redistribute it to people who need it. That is some commie-ass stuff right there. Pardon my French, but holy crap, the level of stupidity, and if you're dumb enough to believe that, you should just move to Ottawa and stay there. Because as far as I'm concerned, like, that's terrible.
Why is the price of gas up? Because the supply is down. Why is the supply down? Because they've turned off the taps. Because they stopped they've stopped pipelines. They're not drilling. The United States cut back on their production. And now they've added to the problem by banning Russian oil. So the supply is less on the world market. It's a commodity. The price goes up when there's less supply. That's why the price is up. Now, do you really think that if the NDP got in, they would actually really tax those oil companies to that level?
Hell yeah.
I don't think so.
They would do it tenfold, and then they would bankrupt everybody with it, and then they'd be like, look what the oil companies did, you guys. It was them.
The oil companies are as woke as anybody, and that's because they play this game with them. If
But
you
look-
go in and I've been to trade shows and seminars, places where oil companies have made presentations, and they have all this green environmental stuff, and they talk about the environment, and they have all these politically correct talking points, and it's because the government might tax them over here, but they just give it back to them over there. And that's how they control those companies as well. They're like, you play along with us and we'll take care of you. We'll give you it here. We'll take it here, but we're going to give it back to you over here. It's just a shell game. And they get the companies to fall into line because they know if they don't, they get beaten with the stick through regulations, regulatory issues, taxation. And they love to demonize the oil companies because some people are going to get really rich as we go to electrified cars. And that's why you see the mayor of Windsor standing up there with these other politicians announcing this $4.9 billion project, which is, in a way, very good for the economy for Windsor, for this Stellantis battery plant. It's a huge, huge investment. It's the biggest automotive investment, and I think the single biggest industrial investment in Canadian history down there. But the government at this point is not even revealing how much government money is going into it. They say it's because they're in negotiations to do other deals with other companies. But we don't even know for sure how much money. We know it's in the hundreds of millions of dollars. But again, look at the way that the politicians act. If you have that kind of investment coming to your community and it's all being driven by government because the government is forcing that stuff. If you're the mayor of Windsor, why do you think he stood up during the pandemic and called people mask holes? It's not just because he's a dick. It's because he's in lockstep with whatever Justin Trudeau wants and Doug Ford. And Doug Ford's in lockstep with Justin Trudeau because of all this money. He knew this stuff was coming. So it's mask holes away. If the government wants to get heavy-handed with protesters at the border, throw them all in jail. It all connects. It influences their behavior, their decisions, their demeanor, their rhetoric. And it's not just because of the money coming into the community. It's also about money that gets into people's pockets and whether they get reelected and all of these factors. So do you think that Drew Dilkens is ever going to stand up and say anything negative about JT or Doug Ford even, when they're down there coughing up this kind of cash? It's our money, by the way.
Oh, yeah.
But keep in mind that this is not capitalism. This is not free market. This is all government driven. It's artificial. So they better be freaking right. Because if they're wrong, we end up paying a big price down the line. And it breeds inefficiency and it breeds corruption.
Well, look at what Jagmeet proposed there. That is not market. That is government manipulation, and that will corrupt the market.
Well, look what he's done. The government created the freaking problem.
Yeah.
Right? They created this problem by basically declaring war on oil and gas. We know that they want to get rid of it. So they've restricted supply. We're all paying through the nose. Now they've banned the Russian oil. Now it's all Putin's fault. They won't accept responsibility for anything they've done or for any of their policies. And these policies have been implemented largely because the NDP has been forcing them. The invasion of Ukraine is in part because of these policies, which weakened our position on the energy front. It made Europe more dependent on oil and gas because we weren't able to provide it. And they didn't make any effort for our oil and gas to go over there. And even now, the Prime Minister stands up there and says that Canada can play a modest role in addressing that issue so that we can replace the Russian oil and gas that's going into Germany and other parts of Europe. Only a modest role? Why don't we crank it right up and send them all the gas and oil that they need and make people here prosperous, because they're just on this whole kick. But do you really think that strip mining for lithium and cobalt is good for the environment? Do you really think that all these batteries that are only going to last 3 or 4 years and then have to be replaced in these vehicles, do you think that process is going to be good for the environment? We haven't even begun to see the implications environmentally from all of these electric vehicles. And I'm not sure exactly where all of that is going, but I'm certain that there are environmental implications from all of this. They call them green, they call them emissions free. It's a lie. There are emissions from electric cars. There will be chemicals, heavy metals, all kinds of hazardous materials that we'll have to deal with and recycle and find ways to handle safely and make sure that these batteries don't blow up when they're in recycling yards. Do you know what's going to happen if, oh my God. Anyway, that's a whole other issue. But the point is, the whole thing is just, it's some people are going to get rich off this stuff, and it's not going to be you and me.
No.
And it's going to make life harder for a lot of people. It already is.
And you know who has the major finger in lithium and cobalt in Africa?
I'm sorry, what was the question?
You know who has the major fingers in lithium and cobalt in Africa, where most of this stuff comes from? China.
Yeah.
They are going to get rich off of it, and we're going to pay them for it. So we could build overpriced electric cars, and the government will subsidize you buying one of these electric cars. You could get $10,000 off, blah, blah, blah. It's like, holy gee.
Yeah. You know, we're sitting on all this energy right here. Canada could be incredibly prosperous. We could be putting, we could have affordable energy, clean natural gas for decades and decades and decades, putting all of that wealth into schools, infrastructure, the clean water we were talking about for the First Nations. That we could solve all of that with the wealth that we would generate without the energy we're just sitting on. But no, they want to strip mine for cobalt in the Congo or lithium. They want to strip mine for lithium in Afghanistan.
Which is also the Chinese has that too.
That's right. This is ridiculous. But it's all Putin's fault. It's all Putin's fault. No, I think they're all looking at their own wallets. That's what I think. And they're handing out government contracts to their friends and allies. And they're tearing things down and costing us all a lot, printing money like it's going out of style. Because it is going out of style, folks. It is going out of style. And the more they print, the more it costs us, because it devalues the dollar, and that means that your savings are worth nothing. It means that your best bet is to spend your money rather than save it and get rid of it as quickly as you can, because tomorrow it's going to be worth even less. And then you see the politicians turn around like Jagmeet Singh, sit there and say, oh, it's the oil company's fault. We need to tax them more. When they make profits, we need to take the money away. Well, that's not really the truth.
Just going to jack it even more.
It's not true. It's not true. We need to get the prices down. He didn't talk about getting the price down, did he?
No.
No, see, he's going to tax the oil companies, take the money for himself, and then decide who gets it. Instead of getting the price down so that you can just go to the gas station and fill your car up with affordable fuel, He wants to keep the price high and tax the crap out of the companies so that he gets to decide who gets the money. That gives him all the goddamn power. Doesn't help me. Doesn't help you. Unless at the end of the process, he decides, that Rick guy's really nice. I really like his podcast. I'm going to donate $1 million. Ain't going to happen, obviously.
Yeah.
And then to qualify, you know what he's going to give you after he taxes the oil companies? He's going to give you UBI, Universal Basic Income, minimum income. That's what they're all worried about over there, is just making sure everybody gets the minimum. I want people to have the maximum. I want people to get to a point where they can realize their maximum potential, to make their maximum wage, to get a great job, to realize their full potential in life, to give their kids a better life than they had, to build a great home and a great life for their families right here in Canada. For everyone. That's what I'd like to see. I'm tired of all these far left-wing socialists talking about and worrying about making sure everybody gets a higher minimum wage. All they worry about is a damn minimum wage. I really don't give a crap about the minimum wage. If we worried more about creating great jobs for people, high-paying jobs for people, the minimum wage would take care of itself, because every boat in the water would rise as the tide goes up. The economy would be booming. People would have great lives. Canadians would be prosperous if we focused on having people reach their maximum potential. Better education, more investment in schools, create more wealth that we can put into all of these programs and infrastructure and hospitals for healthcare, and create better systems where people have choice, and help people get better jobs, high-paying jobs that help them reach their maximum wage. And then they'll have more money to spend in the economy, and that in the end, because I would have more money, you would have more money, and as we spend all of that money, it would end up helping people who are at the lower end of the economic spectrum, who are lower income earners, because more money would flow through the economy to them, because you would have that the velocity of those dollars finding their way to those people in the communities. As people are out making their maximum wage, going out and having dinner at different restaurants, spending more money in their local stores, bringing the economy back. And then people could build their communities back truly better. But all these idiots are concerned about is making sure everybody gets $15 an hour or a universal basic income so that they can hold everybody down, put their boot on your neck, make sure that you comply with everything, use all these rules, regulations, all these economic policies to keep people in line, and making sure you only have one choice: government every step of the way. Government healthcare, government transportation, transit. And all these corporations now really controlled by government. So you think you have choice in a cell phone company, but they're really all controlled by, a few companies which are controlled by government through grants, tax incentives, and regulations. It's all ridiculous, and that's what the problem with the country is. It's complicated, but it's so simple at the same time.
Yep, it's all connected.
If you can support us, go to freedomreporters.com. We don't get any government money over here, nor will we ever take it, because we're just not interested. Because we're interested in free speech, and we want to remain free. We want to be able to speak our mind, and I don't want to ever be controlled by the government. So no government grants here. We are viewer supported. You can help us by donating at freedomreporters.com. We have a lot of work to do, and there are freedom fighters sitting in jail tonight. Paying a price that way, and we need to talk about that to let you know that they're there, because the mainstream media might pay lip service to it briefly, but they really don't give a damn. In fact, they're in favor of it because they're all on the government payroll, and they're just going to tell you what the government wants you to hear. with regard to all of that. And what do we know about these freedom fighters sitting in jail tonight? We know that Tamara Litch and
Chris Barber.
Sorry, they both have been charged with
additional stuff.
Do you have those details, Brendan? I have them here.
Give me
see if I can find them.
Momento, por favor. Yeah, I got it.
So what are the new charges that they're up against? These are more serious charges.
I don't know. They seem kind of weird. I looked at it briefly this afternoon.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see.
So
Tamara Litch and Chris Barber are now jointly charged with mischief, counseling mischief, intimidation, counseling intimidation, counseling obstruction of police, and obstructing police. I've seen Tamara Litch. She didn't seem very intimidating.
Yeah, well, again, let's call it what it is. They're targeting political opponents of the government, and they're not going to tolerate any dissent.
Well,
And
I could see a couple of Crown attorneys sitting around scratching their asses saying, "Oh, well, these charges ain't serious enough. We need to find something more serious." Like, holy smokes, man. This is evil. No other word for it. This is evil.
yeah, they're going to try to make an example of them and paint them as something they're not. But don't stand up against the cops. Don't stand up against the government, which is controlling the cops and using them as a political tool by weaponizing them. Whatever you do, don't stand up. Because if you do, they'll do this to you. They'll arrest you, take you to jail, and then with unlimited resources, because they have an unlimited amount of money, because they're the government, they will come after you and attack you with lawfare. And that's what they're doing here. So they're trying to come up with any charges they can. And this is not an even application of the law at all. Not at all. They see these Freedom Convoy organizers as a real threat. But they're a political threat. They were not, I don't believe, not for one moment, were they ever any kind of physical threat. We saw what really went on there. The dancing in the streets, the outpouring of patriotism, the waving of Canadian flags. These are Canadians who want their country back. And they have policy disagreements with the government. And Justin Trudeau is a tyrant. This is dangerous.
And they've slapped the same charges onto Pat King as well.
Yeah.
Aye.
And there's another person who was arrested with Pat King, Tyson George Billings.
Yes.
And he's also facing additional charges. So this is not over in the courts for these folks. It'll unfold over months, maybe years, as all of this goes on.
Well, it's kind of one of those things. I really wish we had a televised court system here.
Yeah. That it's interesting you say that, because that would create a more open system, right?
Yes.
I would certainly be in favor of putting cameras in courtrooms. This is an issue that has gone on for decades. I remember being in journalism school, and we produced a student documentary about that very subject that was nominated for an award, actually, that year. But we, as students, we came in runner-up. Maybe we were too pro-camera and the too pro-freedom in that documentary. I don't know. I was a little too naive back then to understand all of the politics surrounding political documentaries and the judging process for what was then called the CBC Telefest, where you would submit your student documentaries for judging in this contest that was a CBC run event. But even then, it was a different time.
Of course. Now, I mean, it was very clear with the Kyle Rittenhouse trial, like that it was. I think it was beneficial to the justice system to show everybody all of the nitty gritty. At least I thought.
Yeah, the issue with cameras in the courtroom is a little bit complicated,
Okay,
and it is true though. If you put cameras in the courtroom, sorry, what?
What's the negative side?
Well, the negative side would be that you get lawyers sort of grandstanding sometimes, and if you listen to, say, Marshall McLuhan, right? The medium is the message. It can change the dynamics of what goes on in a courtroom, because now you have a much broader audience. Now it becomes a form of media.
Well, what about Benger? He tried to mess around in the courtroom, and the judge ripped his face off and wore it for Halloween.
But the point is, they try, and whether they behave this way or behave that way, it can influence in ways that you're not even maybe aware of. It can be subtle, but it can influence the way arguments are presented. It can influence. It's a very complex thing, but even stories are told differently through media based on the medium that you're using. So the internet has changed the way stories are told. We are presenting here a story that is presented in a long form and in using a different format than I used to when I was working for CTV, presenting stories in a 6 p.m. newscast where consultants told us that the optimal length of a news story was 1:30. So in 1:30, I had to learn how to write. I had to learn to write news scripts to tell complex stories and convey information to people, including clips from interviews, in 1:30. And that is still done today. But the internet has changed that. And even on the internet, it changes things again, depending on which platform you're on, whether you're on Twitter or TikTok, which is short, or this is long form, or, because YouTube can have long form and short form now. It depends. So then if you know that you're on these social media platforms, or if there is if there's a camera feeding out to, say, YouTube, then it's hard to say exactly how that would affect the way a lawyer chooses to present information, but it could result in them choosing to use more props or use different language or mannerisms or turn to the camera more. It could affect even outcomes of trials in ways that we hadn't foreseen, because it also brings more public scrutiny to bear as well. And then the public, that public pressure and public knowledge can also have an impact on juries and selection of juries and retrials, if there are mistrials, and so on. There are a lot of things to consider that we can't even really get into here tonight, but the medium dictates the way people present information. And so it would certainly change the dynamics in the courtrooms for sure in Canada. And we've seen some of how that plays out in the US, because they do have cameras in courtrooms down there. So
only in state, not federal.
But you can see how it affects there, right? You can see how it works. Mm-hmm. And there would be different rules here than are in place there. But it absolutely changes the dynamic. I'm not sure that it is, there would be positives and negatives. I personally think that it's a positive, because I want as much transparency as possible.
Yeah. And like I said, as long as you have a judge who is going to smack down any stupidity, as they should, and as they have.
I suppose, you know,
yeah.
it's hard to say exactly how it would all play out, right? But in any event, right now, these guys are largely out of sight, out of mind, because there are no cameras in there. The media does report on them a little bit, and they need to, because in a free and democratic society, what was a free society, we need to know where these prisoners are and keep them in the public mind, so that the state can't just tuck them away someplace conveniently and conveniently forget about them.
Do you think the Crown is going to tack even more charges on now?
I think they'll tack on as many as they possibly can. And I think that you're going to see more crackdowns in Calgary, where the police chief, I think, he hasn't come right out to say it, but they're targeting those freedom protesters, who he now calls anti-democracy protesters. He's taken a side, and yeah, they've already got that one. They already have that injunction to limit what they can do. And there will be more restrictions, I think, week over week. And as those protests continue, I think you will see a more aggressive reaction and response from Calgary police, up to and including the use of more violence, which we've already seen this past weekend. And I think that the fact that you're seeing violence is the direct result of the police response. The police are not there keeping the peace. They're breaching the peace. It's the cops who are being violent, in my view. That's from, what my assessment from the video that I've seen over the past week. And I think that was the case in Ottawa. It's the cops that are creating the problem. If the cops would just back off, let the people protest, they might make a little bit of noise, but I think it's their right to do that. That's my opinion again. And I'm not advising anyone to do anything. I'm just on the internet speaking my mind. And if you don't like it, you don't have to tune in. But where was the violence in Ottawa before the cops showed up? Where was the violence in Calgary before the cops showed up? I'm not even sure if there would have been violence had the cops not been there. Not this past week, this past weekend and the weekend before, when the counter protesters showed up. Because I've seen protests where you've had protesters on the freedom side and counter protesters on the other side, and they stood on opposite sides of the street. I've seen it. No cops around, no problem. What happened in Calgary? The cops showed up and they started pushing the counter protesters back 2 weekends ago with their bicycles, and then now they've got complaints from the counter protesters for being abused. And that's, getting more media play than the other way around, when it's the cops pushing back against the freedom protesters that's endorsed by the media. But anyway, just shows that there's not even application here. Things have to change, folks. This can't go on.
Well, my friend, I am out of gas, and I think I need to go back to bed, so...
Yes, it is getting near the end of the evening. We've covered all of our ground, I think, for tonight. It was great to have Marie on.
Of course.
And as we get to the end of the night here, we should remind you that you can donate to us at freedomreporters.com. We have a lot more to bring you. And tomorrow night, Kyle Kemper, half-brother of Justin Trudeau, is scheduled to join us. He was scheduled last night, wasn't able to do it. He'll be on tomorrow night. That's the word that we have from Kyle, and that's going to be a big one. So we're looking forward to that, very excited about it, and that's the kind of material that also we endeavor to bring to you every night here as the Freedom Reporters on the Maverick News Channel.
No, it's going to be huge. I can't wait. And hopefully I'm feeling a bit better. Holy gee.
Yeah. So with that, I'll throw it over to you, Brendan, to kind of wrap up on your end for the night.
Well, we've covered a lot of ground here, and I appreciate everybody tuning in. My name is Brendan Kennedy. I'm the co-host here at Maverick News, and I will see you tomorrow.
And I'm Rick Walker, also one of the Freedom Reporters here at Maverick News. Again, you can donate at freedomreporters.com. We do need your help, and we will catch you back here tomorrow night with Kyle Kemper, half-brother of Justin Trudeau and author of a new book that we will talk about tomorrow night that outlines ways that we can give power back to the people. Here tomorrow night, 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Catch you all on the flip side.